A dual occupancy approval can also include a subdivision approval, but those approvals have a 5-year lifespan. So you don't have to subdivide straight away. So you can build a dual, rent it out and subdivide at a later date. Mind you, the cost of that's going to be increased in 5 years' time. But yeah, it gives you options.
G'day guys, welcome to the MTDC Lounge. This is a podcast that breaks down everything you need to know about designing and building your ultimate home and what to expect. Whether you're a DIY renovator, a budding developer, or everything in between, we'll dive into the building journey, touching on what to expect, what's next, and how to go about it. We'll hear from a heap of experienced consultants and trades about all aspects. So let's get stuck in. Welcome to the lounge. G'day guys, and welcome to another episode of the MTDC Lounge. Tonight I've got one of my good mates, Greg. How are you, mate?
Not too bad, thank you.
Mate, you're working, mate, we've known each other for years.
Yeah.
Absolute years. And you were there when I first started MT Design, and I've just kind of followed you through because you've just been amazing at what you do. Mate, you are a surveyor, you're the operations manager for Nastasi Associates down there in Sydney.
Yep.
Tell the guys what you're about.
Yeah, working in the operations part of things. I generally work with checking stuff as it comes in from the surveyors, processing that, checking drafting, managing subdivisions with clients, working with our surveyors on processes and procedures, just across the board type of thing, making sure that the work gets to clients when it's needed.
Yeah.
So it's an overall range of different things that I work with on a daily basis.
Well, I think what's really great about your position, and I guess how you've got to where you are, you've lived the experience of the residential space of
smashed plenty of pegs in the ground in my years, that's for sure.
Mate, we talk about the importance of, I guess, having a survey and having an accurate, detailed survey even to make sure that we're doing the right job in terms of design and getting everything across the line without having any dramas. If you've listened to any of the episodes, a lot of the time, a lot of our issues are with surveys or the proximity of any of the dwellings or the structures that we have within the boundaries. Yeah. That's why I've got you on here today, because if anyone's going to know anything about the legalities and what people should be watching out for, it's you. So I'm going to hit you with one of the hardest questions straight away. You know, what should these people be watching out for when they go to want to even do renovations or a new build? What are the things that they need to be identifying first?
Well, I mean, the first thing that, as you said, that happens in that process is a contour and detail survey of a property that shows the current land features, trees, footpaths, driveways, existing house. The majority of surveyors these days do their best to do a reasonable boundary fix to make sure that that you know where the building sits and where the fences are within a reasonable accuracy. One of the important things for extension and renovation work is that structure that's sitting on the block. You need to know where it's sitting, because, for example, you'll have a rectangular block, but the house may not be sitting square on that block and parallel to the existing boundary. So then if you're doing extension at the rear, or the client's doing extension at the rear, there's a challenge or a potential issue with that building coming closer and closer to the boundary as you extend further back. One of the other things that it certainly is done with a contour and detail survey, let's say you're doing extensions up or you're building a 2-story home with the challenges that you have in the design process and council requirements, complying development requirements, is the potential issue of overshadowing, privacy concerns. So one of the things that we do tend to do on a regular basis is show the height of the existing building that's on the block, but also locate the buildings either side and show the position of where the windows on that wall of either side's building, how they face. I'll go backwards. Where the windows in those walls facing the property may have some effect on privacy or shadowing.
Because we know when we're doing the design, you need to have approximately 3 hours of sunlight.
You've got to do shadow diagrams.
Exactly, and if we're relying on a survey that's showing the windows and all the bits and pieces to the living area, if we're overshadowing them, the council are going to knock us on the head every day of the week.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, so I guess for all the players at home, there are a number of different surveys. What are those surveys, and we can break those down.
So there's a contour and detail survey, which shows those land features, the slope of the land, trees, what's existing on the property.
Yep.
There's a boundary survey, which is a completely different survey altogether. The accuracy, I could probably quote the general accuracy of a contour and detail survey is to say plus or minus 50 millimetres in accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
When you get down to a boundary survey, that's where it comes under the legislation, and that must be authorised and signed off by a registered surveyor under the current regulations. Those won't change, of course. The accuracy comes down to plus or minus 10, 20 millimetres, and that's positioning any structure either within the land or on the boundaries of the land in relation to the property boundaries to a high degree of accuracy.
Yeah. And they use your mark outs or your peg outs there on the blocks.
Surveyor will there'll be a number of subdivision plans up and down the street, or it may only be one, but there may be some recent ones up and down the street. The surveyor will measure the lots between two cross streets or any survey marks that are in the street that have been monumented connecting to a boundary, to give them that opportunity to have an accurate degree of fixation, they call it, with regards to determining where the property boundaries on the subject lot are. There's a fair bit of work involved.
Yeah.
There are other types of surveys that are done for various reasons. There's volumetric surveys for cut and fill, big volume areas.
They're the multicoloured ones. They're the shaded and the hues of colours.
Yeah, that's right. So you might have a place with a whole lot of spoil or fill that they need to find out what volumes of fill are on a property or in a large commercial site or industrial site, so that they know how much needs to be taken away. Mines, in particular, there's a lot of that done with working out how much needs to be taken out in a mine site. There's the residential. Most of the work that I've done over many decades is residential survey work. So and that involves set outs of buildings. So we place pegs in relation to the approved setback for a new build.
And that identifies for the builder and I guess the client as well where the building is going to go.
Yes, and we'll put marks in away from the building so that when the excavator comes in to cut a flat pad for the building for the slab to go down, the marks are set far enough away so they won't be disturbed, and then the concreter will come in and measure and just put a string line up and form up from there.
Yeah. And then there's the peg out survey,
there's a boundary peg out survey. There's a peg out survey for a start of a new construction.
Yeah.
One of the things that on new builds that we find is essential these days is that once the concreters have formed up the formwork boards and they're ready to pour the concrete, it's quite critical that you get a check on those formwork edge boards before the concrete slab's poured.
Yeah.
That gives you a clear indication of whether there's any discrepancies. Plus or minus 30, 40 millimetres can make a very big difference to a framer who's putting a frame up on a slab.
It's the difference between a complying development or going back to a DA for a resubmission.
Yeah.
Because if you're breaching, if you don't get that peg out done properly, and if the slabbies put the forms up wrong, you get
that's right
back to council you go, right?
And that's where the formwork check comes into play.
Yeah.
Because it gives some certainty to the concreter that everything's right.
Yeah.
To the builder, when the slab goes down, there's no issues with anything out of square. And as I said, with the frames going up, they're invariably done by computer to a high degree of accuracy these days, based on the architectural plans. There's no room for error.
Couple of bucks at the start, saves you hundreds later.
Yeah. And we find quite regularly now that we're actually putting nails in the slab for the line for the, not only for the frames to go up, but for the bricklayers to follow a brick line.
Oh, fantastic.
And get it accuracy. That's very common.
Yeah, no, that's amazing.
Other types of surveys we do on a regular basis with residential work is setting out of retaining walls and making sure that, you know, one of the critical things with a retaining wall is that if you're retaining a block of land, not just the wall but the footings of that wall, the concrete footings, must be wholly within the property boundaries. Otherwise, they're encroaching, even if it's underneath, you know, if it's filled over with soil.
It's one of those things, like the retaining walls. It's the bane of my existence. Like it's like because everybody wants to get as much as they possibly can from their boundary, and there's a million ways that they can do a footing. Well, there's a couple of ways only for footings for retaining walls.
Yeah.
But you know, having those footings wholly in the client's boundary is incredibly important, particularly if they're going to start trying to go for like retaining walls on the boundary or underneath the boundary.
Yes.
Like just today, probably an hour before you walked into, I had a client come through and he's like, "Oh, Matt, I need you to have a look at this deck for me for a pool." And I was like, "Yeah, not a problem." And he goes, "Oh, by the way, you know, a couple of years ago, I threw up a retaining wall. I didn't really pay attention to the boundary. Do you think it's going to be a problem?" I said, "Let me have a bit of a sticky beak at it." And there he is. He's taken over at least 40 square metres of council land.
Yes, and that's a bit of a gotcha. That people think their fence is in the right place. There's no guarantee your fence is exactly on the boundary. No. It could be encroaching inside your property or into the neighbour's property.
Yeah,
and the fence may have been there for 50 years. So that's again where a surveyor will come in to make sure that, you know, even if you are replacing an old fence that's falling down, you need to have a surveyor come in to re-establish that property boundary for you, so you get it accurate and you don't end up having challenges with a neighbour. Neighbour disputes are a big deal these days, especially with properties that the value of properties now, that, you know, those few centimetres here and there,
into a lot.
It's a big deal for people.
Yeah.
So I can understand that.
Well, I mean, I send you some curly jobs. I've sent you a lot of curly jobs, and I've always been on the phone to you. And I'm like, "Hey, we're going to have an issue here," but I haven't sent this one to you actually lately. But just today, like in the last week, I've just had some wild stuff happen with our surveys. One, we've had this client said, "Yeah, we've got a great, nice, perfect straight boundary. Everybody's happy," but in fact, halfway up his block, there was this little tiny dog leg that kind of swung in.
Oh yeah,
and then that dog leg ended up skewing off into a corner
direction.
And this poor bloke was just like, "Well, what am I going to do with that?" And I'm like, "Well, at the moment, it's in your lot, but if you come out to do a fence, you've got to rip it out. You're going to lose space on your block." Yeah. That's one guy. And then I have like several clients, you know, a week, and these clients, one client turns around and goes, "Oh, I hate that tree. I want to get that out of here." I was like, every other day of the week, perfectly fine. But as a matter of fact,
property,
your fence is on old mate next door's yard, and that tree is in their boundary. You can't touch that tree.
Well, apart from the challenges of knocking trees down anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
The best of times.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, the tree preservation orders with councils these days are quite strong.
Yeah, they are, and just having a survey there to show, you know, where those fences are and why those fences are, you know, it's going to be the definitive angle that you're going to attack something one way or another.
Yeah,
and yeah, like it's so important. It's so important, in our opinion, particularly over the years that we've been working together, of getting those surveys, the partial surveys, the detail surveys, and and all the bits and pieces to make sure that they're right. The amount of times we've had people, builders even, call us saying, oh, you know, what's this peg out stuff? What do you mean I have to get
Really?
peg out? You go, come on, mate. Got to go and do that peg out, and then all of a sudden they find out they're breaching setbacks and stuff.
Okay.
G'day, guys. Just quickly, if you're finding this podcast info relevant to you, then I'd like to quickly talk to you about what we do at MT Design Collective. You hear us talk all the time about the importance of solid, detailed home design practices, so that you're not left with extra fees, delays, or unexpected costs in building your ultimate home. Here at MTDC, we design homes and provide plans that builders love to build and councils love to approve. If you're looking at a renovation, a new build, or alteration, then we'd love to help you work out the next steps forward. Book a free, no obligation chat with us, and we'll come out to your site, as it's the only way to truly get authentic, no bullshit advice. Link is in the show notes. Okay, back to the show. So yeah, it's incredible the things that you kind of see, and I dare say you've seen a lot.
Yeah, I've seen a lot over the years. There's a builder that I worked with for a few years ago. One of the things that again comes into play with your designs, architectural designs in any respect, as you mentioned, a lot of people are trying to get the most that they can out of a block of land. So houses are bigger. They're taking up as much as possible on a block. As you know, the minimum side setback on a build is 900 millimetres. I have always advised any of my clients, you never get that approved. Don't build to 900 because there's no way that a builder can build to millimetre accuracy and stay within that 900 mils without potentially encroaching and getting closer. And when that occurs, you'll find in the majority of cases a certifier will be very reluctant to give you final occupation certificate or even sign off on the building process as it's moving forward.
Well, if you're breaching the 900 mil, it's no longer compliant.
There was a builder I worked with a few years back. They had ended up having a wall that was 880 at the front and 870 at the back. It was a 2-story high wall, about 15 metres long. They had two choices. They had to fire rate that wall and the windows, shutters in the windows and sprinklers in the eaves, or pull the wall down. The cheapest option was to pull down 15 metres of 2-story wall. And fix it. Because
the fire rated windows are about 10 grand a piece, depending on how big it is. But they're not cheap for the fire rated windows, because you can't have a perforation in the wall unless it's fire rated within 900 mil of the boundary, and that will 100% break a job. And that's
certifiers, with their challenges that they have these days, they won't risk their insurance or their license.
Well, nobody will risk any of their insurances anymore. So everybody will double checking everything. So part of what we do is when we're doing a design, we make sure we do the 900, but we pull it back an extra 50 mil.
And that's wise, because it gives you a bit of room to play with.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's so many different ways you can throw up a wall. Obviously, you've got your brick, you've got your best block, you got
make a little bit out of the cavity just to make up for it.
Absolutely,
like
and then you've got your direct fix for cladding. You've got your batten out for cladding and things like that. Even if we're doing our measures to the I guess the stud frame, like we still give that extra bit, because
one of the things I'm starting to see recently in the last few years also is that as surveyors we will set out the concrete slab. Okay, we're not setting the wall out. So if you've got a design that, let's say it's got a Hebel wall or cladding for a granny flat, for example, we're setting out that slab exactly where the slab's going to be, on the assumption that the wall's going to sit on the edge of the slab. If you've got Hebel, it's going to sit 25, 30 mils outside the slab. Exactly. So that's again something that crops up. That you got to be that the designer's got to be very careful about. The designer with a building firm or architects, whatever might be the case. So we have found that that's becoming a little more prevalent these days too. And that, I can understand that process is, it's a cost saving. It's a matter of making sure that the buildings are more efficient from lots of different aspects with regards to heat and cooling and things like that. And that's where Hebel for example, can come into play. But the practicalities of the build process is where the challenges can be for both builders and designers.
Well, the danger is now that there's the Design Practitioners Act now, and like if the designers aren't doing the right thing, or if they misrepresent something on the plans and it just goes and gets built, the builder throws his hands up and goes, "Sorry, I just did what the designers did."
So where's your liability?
Exactly. So it's important. It's important for all designers and builders and surveyors. Everybody has to work together to make this nice, neat, cohesive set of plans. And like when we go out to see a client, one of our first things that we say, regardless of whether or not we think we need one, we go, "Hey, you're extending a footprint. You're doing anything extra outside of your footprint, survey every day, because if anything that goes wild, it's no one else's insurance, but it's our insurance.
Yeah.
And if we just go and do a design without any boundaries being aligned, we're getting in trouble.
And on the other hand, there's things that you need to take into account with regards to floor space ratios.
Exactly.
So, and that involves not just the current structure that's on a property; it's also all of the hard surface areas within that that lot that you need to take into account, that you're not overstepping the maximum for the FSRs on a property.
Yeah, which brings up a good point. You guys capture, the non-permeable spaces like the concrete, and then the grass space in the gardens, which do formulate part of that 50% in most councils, landscaped area. So absolutely amazing point. Back onto our surveys though, like what makes a good survey? What can somebody, when they come out, let's say they come out and see you directly and they go, "Hey mate, like I'm looking for a survey," and we'll keep it nice and simple. Let's say we're going 550 square meter block. They go, "Hey mate, Greg, I'm looking for a survey. I don't know what I need. My drafty or my designer has asked me to get a survey." What would you tell them, and what would be the best thing to give them?
I look generally, when I'm quoting these sorts of jobs, I'll generally outline the scope of what we're going to do. And as I mentioned, that's picking up all of the current features on the land. One of the important aspects of doing a survey, as you know, is the property potentially flood affected, and or do councils have a requirement that the levels on that land are shown to what we call Australian height datum. Sometimes it's a prerequisite in the DA conditions, lodgement conditions. As far as the ideal survey, it's really just a matter of knowing what needs to be located by the surveyor on the ground and what's shown on the plan. In most cases, a good survey you can quite easily see from the amount of detail on a plan, examples that I would give someone, for example, to show them the quality of the work.
Yeah.
Corners can always be cut, but that's to a large degree I'm guided by yourself, for example, on the sort of information you need in your experience to get these the design work over the line and to satisfy what you need to consider in the DA process, in your design process.
Yeah. So I know for detail, I know detailed surveys, and like I love your surveys, so I can label them quite easily. What I find is really great is obviously the 200 mil increments.
Yeah, that helps. Yeah.
The 200 mil increments are amazing. Like anything, and I don't know if I'm being spoiled or not, but every time I see a survey, I automatically now assume that it's 200 mil increments. Unless it's a massive block, then I'll start expecting to see 500.
If it's very steep, you'll go to half metre increments. Yeah,
but like there have been times where somebody's dropped off a 250 mil increment, or there's been someone that's come in at a metre increments, and it's one of those things where you've got to know and love your surveyor, because if you don't get the right thing, it's just going to stitch everything up.
Yeah, the unspoken standard is essentially 200 millimetres for blocks of land. Yeah.
What the next super important thing to capture on these these detailed surveys, and I'm noting this because I know that anybody's at home that wants to go and get a survey, they're going to come out and they might speak to you, mate, and they'll go, "Hey, I want a survey, but I don't want the survey that we're talking about on the podcast." So a good survey to me, though, is I want to see 200 mil increments. I want to see easements on the block, if there is easements.
That's important.
Any easements next to the block or behind the block, because if we're not benefited by the easement, I definitely want to know if we're going to be burdened by the easement as well.
Yep.
I want to know the trees and the heights of the trees, preferably anything within a radius that will cause grief to our designs. And so that's that's root ball and all.
Yes, because you've got to take into account the effect on that root spread.
Well, if we want to bench or fully cut out a site, and we're going to cut all the way into that root ball, council aren't going to let that.
And generally speaking, you need to get an arborist to do a report to give you if anything's going to be within that area of where you're building, potentially affect trees. An arborist report on whether that tree can be has to be kept or can be cut down.
And that's an application to council, because I mean, if we're cutting and that's going to do damage to the roots, then are we going to remove that tree? Is the neighbour okay? It causes a whole lot of trouble. So yeah, 100%. The tree and root ball, or you won't do the roots, but you do the tree canopy and things like that.
Tree spread, the root balls are generally the same amount as the spread of the tree in most cases. So you'll find that.
Absolutely. We want the next door neighbours, how close their eaves are to our potential eaves, because we've got a distance we have to worry about.
And we talked about the windows that are facing your land to make sure that shadowing and privacy concerns are taken into account.
Yeah, absolutely. North Point's always important, because the amount of times I've seen a survey and the North Point's shot off all the way over to the other side of the world or something or other, you can't find it. All of the ease of information that's there and available on the plans, some people don't even realise. Like, you need to know where your NBN connections are, where your electricity is coming in, your water lines are coming through, like surface pits and all those kind of stuff.
In most cases, our surveyors are well trained, or most surveyors are well trained to pick up water meters and all that sort of thing. So that, because we understand that that sort of the information is critical to your design work.
Or the manholes, if the manholes get missed. I know you guys put your sewer lines on there, so that's amazing. All the times that I reach for my plans, the first things I look for when I've got a client sitting across the way from me is, where's your sewer line running? Do you have any services in your block? Do you have any easements?
And the challenges, you might say, with sewers is that if we're talking, say, Hunter Water or Sydney Water, there isn't a specific easement created for that of a particular width to encompass that pipe, because it's the pipe itself is essentially an easement under the regulations.
There's an assumed zone of influence, and
yes,
the closer it is up to the surface, the zone of influence isn't as much, but lower down, you've obviously got a bigger space. We, as a general rule at MTDC, we do 1,500 mil on either side of the sewer line. That's roughly what we do, and anything that we kind of build within that zone of influence, it's an email straight to the body. And
because these, in particular with Hunter Water and Sydney Water, they're statutory authorities, they have that right to enforce you to ensure that you're not going to go within that zone of influence of that pipe. And therefore there's that easement as such over the pipe itself, in layman's terms.
There are ways, and I don't want to scare people. There are ways, though, that we can build over the sewer. You
pier over them and concrete encased sewers and things like that.
That's right, yeah.
And you're right, with easements, they're critical. You might have an easement that's, in a vast majority of cases, easements run parallel to a boundary, but you may find at times that there's I've seen old plans or plans that show an easement over existing line of pipes. You don't know where that pipe is under the ground. You'd have to locate it if you needed to know where it was. But that's that can be quite common as well.
The amount of times I've been asked by a client, I could tell you of one that came and saw me a couple of days ago. They've built this house, and they've actually they've got one of their eaves hanging into an easement, which blows me away, because we've never been allowed to put an eave inside an easement. But
an overhanging eave's not really that much of an issue if it's overhanging a drainage easement, for example.
It's a service. It's a service easement.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
yeah.
It's so I've never seen it, and I know we've been picked up for it before. So it was interesting to me to see, and I think that's an important thing that I want to mention as well. Is like how important is it to make sure that we have those easements correct, because you can't cut or fill inside it.
Yeah, and we've there's, as I mentioned earlier, the Newcastle area, like a lot of the west areas of Sydney, the older areas of Sydney, Newcastle was developed 150 years ago, and there's subdivision plans that date back 100 years. And something I was going to get onto with regards to easements. You want to go there?
Yeah, let's do it.
So, and this flows into 88B instruments.
Yeah, which is one of the docs that they get for part of the contractor sale and things that we need to design.
Between 1920 and 1964, the developers would develop multi-lot subdivisions, and they would show, let's say, a row of lots drained to the rear, sloped to the rear, and there had to be a drainage easement created over the property behind or over those lots themselves at the back to allow for water to drain. So it may also slope from one street to the next, but the lots themselves slope to the back. A lot of these old plans would show proposed drainage easements, and the easement itself wasn't created until the actual sale of an individual property was made, and a transfer, and then that easement. And more invariably, those sorts of things tended to go unnoticed. In 1964, they brought in the 88B into the Conveyancing Act, which allowed the developers to create an easement as part of the registration of the plan.
Right.
Over every lot, burdening every single lot, and alternately allowing the benefit of that easement, if that was the case. So, you might find that this lot drains over that one, over that one, over that one, but each is affected, but each is also benefited by the fact that they can drain their land over the downstream lots. So
I know it probably sounds really simple, but I mean just to confirm. So when a block is burdened by it, it means the easement's on their block, and that means they can't build within it.
And it's shown on their title.
And when they're benefited by it, it means they're either burdened and benefited, which means
or they have the benefit of it, and it's shown on the title as a pertinent to that property. So they have the access, the ability to access it.
So which means this old mate next door, he's unfortunately got this 2 metre easement to drain water, and as long as that easement is on your boundary or matching your boundary, you're allowed to connect your stormwater to his easement that's on his block, because you're benefited because of the 88B.
And the title,
because you're benefited by that easement on old mate next door's block, you can use it.
That's not to say that you've got an easement that runs down the side of a property and you're here and building here and it slopes to the rear and you want to get access to that easement. You can negotiate with the owner next door to have legal access to the easement, so you can put your stormwater into that.
That's it. That's if it doesn't attach to your.
If it's not on the title, you can go through a negotiation with the neighbour behind. We find a lot of, in particular, builds where a property does slope to the rear, and they're going to do a new build. And obviously, you're going to knock down the existing house and build a new one. There's going to be a lot more roof area, therefore more stormwater. Council won't allow you to. Where in the past you'd have a dispersion trench, just put a trench in the backyard and the water would go into that, seep into the water table slowly, where you would have to, council will insist that you need to request an easement over the property behind you that goes down to the street behind to allow that development to then drain through an easement of the property behind. That becomes a bit of a minefield in that there's then the negotiation process between two owners about granting access to an easement.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're essentially cutting anywhere between 900 to 2 meters of.
There's a contract needs to be put in place. You're digging up that person's land. You're laying down pipes. You've got to make it, put it back as it was in actual respect. So there's that.
That's pretty crazy.
We find quite commonly in very new subdivisions where they're very small blocks of land, 9, 10 metre wide lots, you'll find quite common that the building, as these buildings are built down the street, they're all close to one boundary. Then they are closer to one boundary than they are on the other side. You might have a garage that's a 50 mil setback because it's not a habitable building. But the developers create easements for support and access. So that if there's any repairs that need to be made along that wall, because it allows you to access the neighbour's property to make good any repairs to the eave or the guttering or that sort of thing. That's quite a common process.
Well, a lot of the new estates and things like that, particularly we've got you've got Moneybung up here, or you've got Cameron Park just down the road. Like there's a lot of retaining walls, and a lot of there are many easements. There are many types of easements. I've seen some crazy easements. But one of the main easements in these estates that are going up at the moment, because they're so hilly, is they have a certain, I think it's about a 200 mil easement, just on the lower side of the retaining wall. It means you can't dig within that space because you'd undermine it.
In case you undermine it.
And I've got a case right now where the retaining wall itself, they cut within that easement, and they cut underneath. Well, they didn't cut underneath the retaining wall, but they cut enough for all of the aggregate to come spilling out underneath it. And it's like the easement's there for that purpose, and obviously now there's that risk of obviously
smaller and smaller blocks of land mean that there's things that need to be taken into account when you're building a 2-story house on a 10 metre wide lot.
Just trying to fit a family of 4 and all your bits and pieces, and Nan and Pop come in as well.
The buildings become longer instead of wider.
And look, it's unfortunately part of I guess the drive for all the new houses and things like that.
The cost, you have a look at in Sydney with the cost of land. You're spending $800,000-900,000 just on a block of land, and then you double that for the build.
When you do your surveys, and one of the best things that I love about you, Greg, mate, is when you will call me and say, Matt, we've got a problem. We've got a problem with this survey, and the amount of times you've done that makes my heart sink, blood run cold. What are the things that you would suggest that people need to watch out for? There are things that I know when you call me and say, we've got a problem, I freak because it's like, damn it, I'm really going to have to deal with it. But just so I don't have to explain it to everybody, what are your most common things that you see?
Easements are certainly one.
Yep.
We briefly talk about this every now and then. Limited title. Qualified title.
Yep.
The boundaries of the land have not been surveyed by the Surveyor General. So therefore there's some potential inaccuracy in the boundaries. And there's no guarantee by the state government that what you may see on a plan is exactly what you own.
Which then causes a big problem too, doesn't it?
Well, there can be a few problems involved. So let's say you want to get some finance to rebuild or do extensions, whatever might be the case. Well, the bank might be reluctant to lend you any money because it's a limited title and it's not guaranteed by the state government.
And you can only assume until you get a proper survey done that gets registered.
Yes.
That this is your block.
That's right.
And then, and then it's almost first in best dressed almost. Whoever can get their title, I guess.
Yeah. And you have the potential of a property having less value than, or even if you went to sell a property with limited title, you might find that solicitors or conveyancers doing their due diligence will advise a prospective purchaser to be very wary because it's limited title and there's no guarantee.
They should.
Yes. They should. So the only way to have that limited or qualified title removed is to do what we call a plan of delimitation. A surveyor will have to, under the regulations, has to do a full plan of survey that's registered with land titles, with Land Registry Services, confirming the property boundaries, and that may be subject to quite significant change. Well, I've found in the past on a number of cases where the actual position of the fence determines where the boundary is going to be. In a lot of these cases, when you're doing a limited title, if the fence is not sitting where the original boundaries were nominated to be, the surveyor's bound to consider that position of that fence and potentially adopt the boundary where the existing fence is. That's assuming the fence has been there for quite a while.
So yes, and I mean that again, that touches on a super important bit, because I mean, if you've put your fence, or if this fence has been here for 50 odd years or something like that,
that's the thing.
You're assuming that you've looked after this property for 50 years.
You might have an old mate who's had 3 properties in a row and built 3 homes that he's had his kids lived in, and he's passed away and he's sold them off the family sold them off one by one. But during that period of time, he's put a fence up wherever he wanted the fence to go.
Because he owned it all. Because he owned all 3 blocks.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's incredible. And then I assume, because people would go and buy the block based on the limited title and nothing concrete in, and then when they go, well, hang on a minute, I now want to split my block, and then because old mate a couple of years back turned around and said, well, you know what, I want a little bit of this, and my kids can.
And you might find in that delimitation, or what we call a redefinition survey, that they either lose or gain land in that process. And that's not a cheap process to have that to the amount of work that a registered surveyor has to go to prove those property boundaries. Essentially, they have to, in layman's terms, measure all of the property boundaries between the 2 cross streets.
Yep.
They've got to measure to the rear street, and they've got to prove that every lot up and down the street is consistent and there aren't any shifts or excesses or shortage, because you might find that what is on a plan between the 2 cross streets, when you get onto the ground itself, there's more or less land between the two that's in relation to what's shown on the original plan that may date back 100 years.
Well, 150 years, there wasn't any curb and gutters back then. It was until roads.
They weren't using laser technology either back then. So, using old chains and wires to measure stuff. So,
it's come a long way.
Yeah, that's right. There was a responsibility for the surveyors to do the best they could, of course, and under the regulations at any given time. But when you hark back to 100-year-old blocks of land, it's in a lot of cases it's virgin bush.
One of the best things I think about surveying is that you guys are just guys who have a massive Easter egg hunt all day, every day. You just walk around. Yeah. You hide your little pegs everywhere.
I still walk down the street looking. There's a survey mark. There's another one.
I remember. I'll never forget the time it was like, if you're walking through and you find a pin in a rock somewhere, that's a survey mark.
And it's a lot of survey work for surveyors is investigating. You might find a pin in an old fence post, and in your opinion, that's a nail that's put in by a surveyor 30 years ago.
Yeah,
and you adopt that as where you think that that boundary is.
Is there like a log? Is there like a log with hey, I walk past this one and I put a peg here?
Well, we do identify them, and when we describe them in our these days with the electronic equipment, we code the points that we pick up in a particular way that identifies it for the registered surveyor if he's doing the work himself, or if one of our surveyors is doing it under his supervision. It's incumbent on the surveyor to present that information to the registered surveyor to give him confidence that they know what they've picked up, and describing the marks they've picked up, and identifying old round posts or an old square post or something like that. It's quite important. It's a lot of investigating work.
So what you're saying is, if you find a peg anywhere, don't muck around with it.
No, just leave it. It's good. Leave it.
Colour it in, move it around.
Don't push it. Don't pull the nail out and put it somewhere else.
Just drop it a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, mate, I mean, there's such a wealth of information from you, and it's part of one of the reasons why we've had...
It'd be never ending.
Absolutely. And it's part of one of the reasons why we've had such a good relationship over the time. I can always call you. I can always ask you for any advice or information, and you've always been super helpful. So anybody listening, 100%, I recommend coming out to see you guys and speak to you guys.
Yep.
So I guess lastly, what are the cost difference between our 4 surveys that we spoke about earlier, and lastly, what are the cost expectations around a Torrens subdivision?
Generally speaking, a detailed survey on a a standard residential lot, you'd be looking at up to $2,000, generally speaking. The construction survey costs are, in most cases, if you're working for a builder on a regular basis, you have a set of fees that you work with, because if you're getting volume from that builder, you can give them competitive fees. If it was an owner builder looking to build a new build or doing some extensions, generally speaking, I would suggest that survey fees from a start to finish on a new build or an extension. You're probably looking at $3,000 to $4,000 in total, that sort of thing. Subdivisions are a different thing.
Yeah. Incredibly expensive too, though.
They are very expensive. Oh, they can be.
Yeah.
If a surveyor's got to spend 3 weeks on a survey doing that and the calculations and preparation of the plan for a duplex subdivision because of the age of the subdivision and surrounding lots and the lack of boundary information, those costs could be $6,000 to $9,000 or more. Not taking into account the fees for council fees and service authorities and all that other stuff. The planners' fees for getting them over the line for the subdivision certificate, council fees. So there's a bigger cost with subdivisions, but it's relative to
what you get,
the difficult nature of it.
And I think like you touched on a super important point there too as well, because I mean, while you don't have to subdivide a block that you've put another house on, it's just it's a dual lock.
Council can approve a dual occupancy without a subdivision approval. Then you can go back to council to subdivide later.
Once you get a little bit of money, like if you get a little bit of cash out of it, for sure.
A dual occupancy approval can also include a subdivision approval, but those approvals have a 5-year lifespan, so you don't have to subdivide straight away. So you can build a dual lock, rent it out, and subdivide at a later date. Mind you, the cost of that's going to be increased in 5 years' time, but it gives you options. And I find many clients that do that. They'll build and do just rent the properties out to get some income back to cover their outgoings.
And it doesn't really matter for the client until they go, well, you know what, I want to actually sell that house now. And then you go, well, you're going to have to go through the subdivision process.
Yeah, so a family might occupy the building, both units, and you've got son-in-law and daughter in the property next door, and we don't need to subdivide until it's time to
or mum and dad
to move on.
That's right.
Mum and dad want to downscale.
Yeah. We've only scratched the surface of this surveying stuff, and mate, I've got a million questions, and I guess
let's have another go whenever you're ready.
I reckon. Thanks, mate, for joining me again tonight. Pleasure. I really appreciate it. Well, there you have it, guys. Greg from Nastasi Associates, mate. Again, thank you so much for coming out.
Pleasure.
If you have any questions, please feel free to shoot a couple through. We'll ask him, and when you come back on, we'll chew the fat again.
More than happy to, mate.
Cheers, mate. Thanks for listening to this week's app of the Lounge. To make sure you don't miss out on the next episode, hit subscribe. We'd love to get the message out to more homeowners like you. Make sure you leave a rating and a review, and we'll see you on the next app.